What keeps you up at night? Not so much with dread, but more with purpose. I asked Bill Holston from the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center that question when we met up at Slow and Steady Coffee in Oak Cliff. This is the Mighty Good Podcast, a series of quick conversations with changemakers who are making our world a better place. I'm Rob Shearer. What's a conversation that Dallas isn't having but needs to?
Well, that's I thought a lot about that, honestly. And I'll start by saying people are having a lot of important conversations. So that's why it's hard to answer that question. I mean, people are talking about child poverty. People are talking about disparities in income and life expectancy. But what I don't hear many people talking about is the fact we live in a progressive city. I want a progressive city that provides water breaks for our people working in construction. We want a safe place, welcoming place for immigrants. We want protections for transgender people, and our state and national leaders don't want that. And so, as much as we want to create this community that we want, we have outside forces, people outside of our community that are working against us. And we should be talking about legal strategies and political strategies to fight back against that. Because I live in Dallas, you live in Dallas for a reason. We love this community, and I don't much like people in Wichita Falls talking about the community that we want here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Actually, it's not that I don't like it, I hate it.
All right, so Bill, what keeps you up at night? Not so much from a place of anxiety, but more with purpose.
Well, I'd say it's what we do at the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center. We have a solution for preventing illegal evictions, and all we lack is the resources to fully fund it and do it. And that gives me real purpose.
You know, I think when people think of stopping evictions, they don't think of it being illegal.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the reality on the ground in terms of the legality or illegality of evictions?
Sure. I think, first of all, people misunderstand why people are getting evicted. I think a lot of times people think that the folks are deadbeats, they just don't want to pay their rent, and they don't understand most people are one crisis away from being able to pay the rent. And that's why they're not paying their rent. It's some crisis in their life. They've had to choose between a medication or fixing a car or something like that and paying their rent. And I think people don't know. They'll say, well, why don't people just pay their rent? I'm like, well, people should pay their rent. They should comply with the lease, but landlords should comply with the law as well. That's the way law works. And landlords historically have totally ignored their legal obligations to provide notice and how they maintain the properties, all of that.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really interesting. I'm really glad for the work you guys do.
Thank you.
And the statistic of your effectiveness when a tenant has representation, you guys are greater than 80% effective?
We were. It's counterintuitive. We have and expect our success rate to go down because landlords start complying with the law. But at the very beginning, we won 97% of our cases. And that tells you how many landlords were ignoring the law. Well, over time, now that we're there in court, they know they're being held accountable.
So you've changed the behavior of landlords.
We
That's
absolutely
amazing.
have.
That's really cool.
And so now I think our success rate is around 70% now. So it's actually declined quite a bit, which sounds like, well, you're doing worse. Well, that's fulfilling our mission.
You're changing the system.
That's right. That's our real goal.
Bill, what's the hardest truth about impact work that no one talks about?
I hate to say failure, but the difficulty of obtaining funding, unrestricted, multi-year dollars to continue your work. So the way philanthropy works, it's earmarked for very, very specific reasons, and nobody wants to pay what they call overhead, which is really the salaries of the people doing the work. That's really across the board in the foundation world, a reluctance to do the most important thing of all, which is paying for the people that are doing the work. And I don't hear that talked. Well, you hear it talked about with nonprofit leaders, but you don't hear it talked about generally.
Right. And I would think with you guys, the people doing the work are the vast majority of your overhead.
That's true. That's legal aid. That was true at Human Rights Initiative where I was. Most of our budget, because we operate very, very, very thin, like administratively very thin. I mean, even more so at DEAC because we don't have a physical space. So we don't, we have a printer in our house and we're using our cell phones, and so it's the value is in the people doing the work.
And how many attorneys do you guys have now?
We just hired our 8th lawyer.
Okay. And what percentage of eviction cases in North Texas are you able to provide?
I think we're at about 30%.
So there's significant room to grow.
Oh yeah.
And limited only by funding at this point?
That's right, yeah. Once we are 100% funded, we'll be in every court. Now, we won't be able to represent every tenant. First of all, not every tenant wants legal help. They should, but they don't. And people don't show up for court. A lot of people don't show up for court, and we're seeing that increasing with Spanish-speaking populations. People are very, very afraid right now, and they're not coming to court.
Which only makes it worse.
And it's particularly sad because people have legal defenses. If they showed up and they had a lawyer, they'd have a shot at beating an illegal eviction. But they have no shot at it if
you don't show up. Who pushes you to do better, and how do they push you?
My coworkers, these young, passionate human rights warriors, people that knew this was the kind of work they wanted to do when they went to law school, and they go to court every day facing landlords and hostile judges, and they get up and do it again the next day. And they're courageous people, and I feel really inspired to be around them.
That's awesome. How have you found inspiration in 2025?
Well, it's interesting. I was asked to speak at a Unitarian church a couple weeks ago, and I used the theme of what would John Lewis do? Because I had just finished reading a biography of John Lewis. And so I found a lot of inspiration. So I started the year thinking about John Lewis and his life, and the idea that he went from the youngest person on the stage with Dr. King at the March on Washington to being a United States congressman. And over that time, he was arrested 40 different times, several times as a United States congressman. So he went from young activist in his 20s to somebody who was finding inspiration in the Black Lives Matter movement at the very end of his life. And so that trajectory of activism for decades, I find very inspiring.
Absolutely. Have you ever been arrested?
I have not. I said that with a little disappointed.
We're clearly not doing something right.
Exactly.
He was at 40 times. That's amazing.
I think about Eric Folkerth, the pastor at Kessler Park United Methodist, who has been arrested sitting at the White House.
Yep, absolutely. What makes you optimistic about Dallas right now?
And it almost sounds cliche to say this, but it's the truth, is young activists. Seeing people that, and high school students. Like, I saw a YouTube video recently of a high school student in Keller ISD is going through that split, speaking to the school board. And the idea that a 17-year-old kid would have the courage to go and speak on behalf of this white teenager, talking about how he objected to their school district being split because of for racial reasons. Yep. And that's very, very inspiring. And it gives me optimism because, let's face it, my generation, we're boomers we're the like worst, and seeing young people, they don't, they want a world where everybody's treated with dignity, and that makes me optimistic for the future.
Thanks for joining us on the Mighty Good Podcast. Hope you found some inspiration. Please like and subscribe and follow wherever you find your podcasts or videos.